There's a wall in your life that just took a hit, and here's the strange part. You don't actually know if you built that wall yourself or inherited the blueprint from somebody else entirely. Maybe it showed up as a text that landed wrong. Maybe it was a silence at the dinner table that ran 4 seconds too long. Maybe nothing visible happened at all, and you just felt the pressure in a room change without being able to name why. That's not random, and it's not in your head. Two forces are pulling against each other right now, one wanting precision and the other wanting freedom. And the friction between them has been running quietly through your closest connections for days. And right as that friction starts to loosen its grip, something else is moving in behind it. A fog. Not a bad fog, just one that makes edges harder to see, timelines harder to trust, and other people harder to read. The next few minutes are going to show you exactly where people misjudge this exact window and how to walk through it without knocking down something you'll want back later. Picture two blueprints laid over the same building. One is drawn by a hand that wants every measurement exact. Check it twice, sand the edges, don't move forward until it's right. The other is drawn by a hand that wants options open, wants to keep moving, wants 3 exits instead of 1. Neither blueprint is wrong on its own. The problem is what happens when you try to build from both at the same time. That's roughly what's been happening overhead. One planet governing precision, closeness, and refined standards has been squared off against another governing movement, speed, and restless curiosity. A hard 90-degree angle, not a smooth handoff. The sharpest point of that pressure already crested a couple of days ago. It's easing now, but easing is not the same as gone, and a wall that took a direct hit doesn't forget the impact just because the crack stopped spreading. Here's what makes the next stretch trickier than the peak of the tension itself. Right as that structural stress starts to settle, the moon has crossed out of a sign that likes clean lines and detached observation and moved into Pisces, a water sign that dissolves hard edges instead of sharpening them. You can usually feel this kind of shift before you can explain it. Music hits differently for a day or two. You tear up at something small. You want to be near water, or you want to sleep an extra hour, or your usual sharp read on a situation goes soft at the edges without you deciding to let it. That's genuinely useful in a lot of ways. It softens judgment, opens intuition, makes you more permeable to what other people are actually feeling instead of just what they're saying. But it also does something less convenient. It blurs your sight lines exactly when you're trying to assess whether a structure is safe to lean on again. You get a rare double condition, a wall still recovering from stress and reduced visibility for inspecting the damage. That combination, more than the argument itself, more than the miscommunication itself, is where people make design choices they end up tearing out 6 weeks from now. Not because the feeling was fake, because the light was bad when they decided what the feeling meant. Think about how this actually shows up. It's rarely a dramatic blowout. It's smaller than that. A reply that takes longer than usual. A plan that gets vague instead of confirmed. A tone in someone's voice that you can't quite place as annoyed or just tired. Under clearer skies, you'd read those signals accurately, or at least you'd know you needed more information before deciding what they meant. Right now, with the fog rolling in on top of a wall that's still tender, your mind wants to fill in the blanks fast, and it usually fills them in with the worst-case blueprint, because uncertainty feels worse than a bad answer. That urge to resolve the unknown immediately before you actually have enough to go on is the root of almost everything we're about to walk through. It helps to understand why these two particular forces clash instead of just knowing that they do. The precision-seeking side of this equation wants competence, wants to be trusted for getting the details right, wants closeness that's been earned through consistency. The restless side wants stimulation, wants room to change its mind, wants connection that doesn't feel like it's closing off other options. Put those two wants in the same room, and neither one is lying about what it needs. They're just asking for different things at the same moment, which is a far more common problem than either side actually being wrong. That reframe matters, because most people spend this window trying to figure out who's at fault, when the more accurate question is simply where the two blueprints diverge. The most common reflex when something feels off is to push harder for resolution. You sense the tension, so instead of letting the structure settle, you lean into it, send the longer message, ask the sharper question, restate your point one more time, hoping repetition will finally land it. It makes sense as an instinct. Pressure feels like progress, but a wall that's still absorbing a hit doesn't need more weight put on it. It needs time to redistribute the load it already took. Adding pressure now doesn't resolve the crack. It just tests how much more the structure can take before something actually gives. Picture the ordinary version of this. Someone cancels plans with a short, slightly flat message, no explanation, no cushion, just "can't make it tonight." Under normal conditions, you'd shrug and move on. Right now, with residual friction still in the air, that short message lands like a verdict. So you rearrange your whole evening around proving a point. You send a longer reply than the moment calls for. You bring up something unrelated from 3 weeks ago because it suddenly feels connected. You're not actually responding to what happened. You're responding to the leftover charge from an aspect that's still finishing its pass through the sky, and you're using someone else's short message as the outlet for it. Here's the part worth sitting with. The version of you reacting right now is not working with full information, and you already sense that even as you're doing it. The specific words you'd choose to send in this exact hour are very often not the words you'd choose to send in 3 days, once the structural stress has actually finished settling. That's not weakness, that's just accurate timing. A contractor doesn't inspect load-bearing damage the moment after impact. They wait for the dust to clear, because the reading is more honest once it does. Give yourself the same courtesy you'd give a building. Let the first wave pass before you decide what the crack means. If it still needs addressing in 3 days, it will still be there, and you'll be looking at it with clean sight lines instead of through the fog of the moment it happened in. There's a specific version of this that hits creative and work situations too. A collaborator gives blunt feedback, and instead of taking a breath, you fire back a defense of every line, every choice, every reason you were right, turning a 5-minute note into a 2-day standoff. Ask yourself, before you hit send on anything right now, am I adding a necessary correction, or am I just adding pressure to a wall that's already stressed because pressure feels like doing something? Sometimes the most productive move available to you this week is genuinely just not yet. It shows up in families the same way it shows up everywhere else, just with older wiring behind it. A sibling makes an offhand comment that would normally roll off you, and instead you find yourself typing out a full paragraph defending a decision nobody actually challenged. A parent asks one extra question about your plans, and it lands like an accusation, so you answer 3 questions they never asked, just to get ahead of criticism you're bracing for out of habit, rather than because it's actually coming. None of that is you being dramatic. It's a nervous system that's picked up on real pressure in the air and doesn't yet know the difference between this week's specific friction and every other tense exchange it's ever had to defend against. Naming that difference out loud, even just to yourself, is often enough to lower the volume. Romantic situations carry their own version, and it's usually the most expensive one because the stakes feel highest exactly when the read is least reliable. One person wants to talk it through immediately, in full detail, right now, tonight. The other wants space to think before they say anything at all. Under normal circumstances, that's just a difference in pace. This week, the one who wants to talk it through immediately reads the other's need for space as stonewalling and pushes harder to force the conversation open before either person is actually ready to have it well. Pressure applied to someone who needs room rarely produces the closeness it's reaching for. It usually produces the opposite, someone backing further away from a door that's being pushed on too hard. The second mistake runs almost opposite to the first, but it comes from the exact same root, not tolerating ambiguity long enough to let it resolve on its own. Under this Pisces influence, communication gets softer and slower almost everywhere. Replies take longer. Plans stay loose instead of getting confirmed. People say maybe and we'll see more than usual, not because they're hiding something, but because the sign itself makes committing to hard edges feel less natural for a few days. That's simply weather. It's not a message. The mistake is treating the fog itself as an answer. Someone doesn't text back within the hour you expected, and by the third hour, your mind has built an entire narrative. They're upset, they're pulling away. This is the beginning of the end. None of that came from evidence. It came from discomfort with not knowing, dressed up as intuition. Real intuition, the kind this lunar placement can genuinely sharpen if you let it, tends to feel quiet and steady. The anxious story building that fills a silence with worst-case detail is a different thing entirely, and it's much louder. Here's the useful distinction to hold on to for the next couple of days. Fog doesn't mean the door is locked. It means you can't see the door clearly yet. Those are not the same situation, even though they can feel identical from the inside. A locked door has evidence behind it, a pattern, a direct statement, something concrete. Fog has nothing behind it except reduced visibility. If you catch yourself building a full conclusion out of a delayed reply or a vague plan this week, try pausing on one honest question. What do I actually know right now, separate from what I'm afraid of? Usually, the honest list is short. A message hasn't been answered yet. That's it. Everything else you added is architecture you built yourself in weak light, out of discomfort. This matters most in situations that actually carry some real weight. A slow reply from someone you're genuinely getting close to, an unclear response about a plan you were counting on, a pause before feedback on something you care about. The temptation is to treat the ambiguity as the worst version of itself so you can stop sitting in the discomfort of not knowing. But resolving discomfort early by assuming the worst isn't actually resolving anything. It's just trading one uncertainty for a false certainty that happens to feel safer, because at least it's decided. Let a few things stay genuinely unresolved this week. Not every open question needs to be closed by force. Work situations are a common trap here too. You send something you're proud of, and the response takes 2 extra days. Under normal conditions, you'd assume a full inbox. This week, the mind jumps straight to they hated it, or worse, they're rethinking the whole arrangement. 9 times out of 10, what actually happened is exactly what the fog suggests it might be. Someone else is also moving a little slower, a little softer, a little less inclined to commit to a hard answer right now than usual. That's not a verdict on your work. It's the same weather everyone else is standing in, and it passes. This is where the first two mistakes, left unchecked, combine into the costliest one. You push harder into the friction, and you read the fog as a locked door. And together, those two things create a felt urgency that isn't structurally real, a conviction that you have to act now, decisively, permanently, or the situation will get worse. That felt urgency is loud. It is also, this week specifically, one of the least reliable signals available to you. Real urgency is much rarer than urgent feeling moments. Most of what feels unbearable to leave unresolved today will look completely different with 2 or 3 days of settling and better light. This is where people make the decision they can't fully take back, ending a relationship over a rough 48 hours instead of a real pattern, quitting a shared project after one tense exchange instead of one honest conversation, sending the message that closes a door permanently when a shorter pause would have let the same door open again on its own. None of these decisions are made out of malice. They're made out of exhaustion with the discomfort, a desire to just have it be over one way or another because a bad ending feels more bearable than an unresolved middle. But a demolition-level decision made using a damaged, fogged read of the situation is very rarely a decision you'd make again once the structure has actually settled and you can see it clearly. There's a compounding version of this worth watching for too. One rash decision under this influence rarely stays isolated. It tends to justify the next one. You send the message that ends things, and then because you've now committed to that story, you start reading everything that happens afterward as proof you were right to send it. The wall comes down, and instead of stopping to look at what was actually salvageable, you start looking for reasons the demolition was necessary all along, because reversing course would mean admitting the read was off. Catching that pattern early, before the first domino falls, is worth far more than trying to catch it after the third one. So here's a rule worth adopting for the next few days specifically. No irreversible decisions while the fault line is still settling. Not because your feelings aren't real, they are, but because feelings under structural stress and reduced visibility are an unreliable narrator for anything permanent. Draft the message if you need to get it out of your system. Don't send it tonight. Decide to quit if that's genuinely where you land. Don't announce it in the same hour you decided. Give the specific plan 48 hours of daylight. If it still holds up once the fog thins and the wall stops being tender to the touch, it was real, and you'll execute it with a clear head instead of a reactive one. If it doesn't hold up, you just saved yourself from tearing out something that was actually still structurally sound. Not everyone under this influence overreacts. Some people do the opposite, and it's just as costly in its own quieter way. Instead of pushing into the friction or reading the worst into the fog, they avoid the whole situation. Change the subject. Say, "We're fine," without actually checking if that's true. Let the vague plan stay vague forever instead of following up. Under Pisces conditions specifically, avoidance can feel remarkably like peace. The water sign is genuinely good at dissolving edges, and it's easy to mistake a dissolved edge for a resolved one. But unresolved friction under new fog doesn't disappear. It just goes quiet for a while, and quiet things under fog tend to resurface later, usually at a worse time, usually with more weight attached, because now there's a second layer of avoidance stacked on top of the original tension. Think of it like skipping the inspection on a wall, took some kind of hit, because checking it feels like inviting more bad news. The crack doesn't care whether you looked at it. It just keeps existing either way. And structures that don't get inspected tend to fail at the least convenient moment, not the most convenient one. Watch for it at the family dinner table specifically, since that's where a lot of avoidance under this influence tends to hide in plain sight. Something gets said that lands wrong, and instead of anyone naming it, the whole table pivots to a safer topic within seconds, and everyone agrees without saying so to just not mention it again. It feels like harmony in the moment. It's actually just the crack getting painted over instead of looked at, and painted over cracks have a habit of reopening at the next holiday, the next gathering, the next moment when everyone's already a little tired and a little less patient than they were tonight. The fix here isn't to force a dramatic conversation you're not ready for. It's much smaller than that. Do a short, honest inspection, even if only with yourself first. Name specifically what felt off in one sentence without demanding it get fully resolved today. Something felt tense in that exchange. That plan never actually got confirmed, and it's been bothering me. I noticed I've been avoiding bringing this up. You don't need the whole renovation plan in one sitting. You just need to actually look at the crack instead of walking past it and calling the hallway fine. There's a version of this worth trying with a friend too, since friendships are often where avoidance runs longest without anyone calling it out. You notice a distance that's crept in over the last few weeks, and instead of asking about it directly, you both just quietly text a little less, like /comment a little less. Let the thread go cold on its own, so neither of you has to be the one who brings it up. That's not neutral. That's a choice made by both people to let something matter less than admitting it mattered would require. One honest sentence: I feel like there's been some distance between us lately and I miss how things were. Costs less than the slow fade usually costs both of you. Here's the reframe that changes almost everything about this window once you actually apply it. Friction between two forces that both want good things, just in incompatible ways, isn't proof that something is broken. It's information about where two structures genuinely differ. And information is useful precisely because it lets you build something more accurate going forward instead of guessing. And the fog isn't a punishment for not having answers fast enough. It's an invitation to trust a different kind of instrument than the ones you usually rely on. The read you get from your gut, from your body, from the quiet feeling underneath the noisy one, instead of needing full visual clarity before you're willing to act with any warmth at all. The practical move is simple, even if it doesn't feel simple in the moment. Step back from the wall. Stop standing directly inside the situation, hand pressed against the crack, trying to feel exactly how bad it is from an inch away. Ask what this would look like to someone standing across the street with no stake in it at all. 9 times out of 10, from that distance, it looks like two people who care, both a little off their usual footing, both slightly harder to read than normal, neither one actually trying to cause damage. That vantage point alone resolves more than any message you could send tonight. If you want a concrete version of this technique, rather than just the idea of it, try this. Write out exactly what you want to say, in full, with none of it softened. Then don't send it. Put it down for a day. Read it again tomorrow with slightly clearer light behind you, and notice which parts still feel true and which parts were only the pressure talking. Most people find that maybe a third of what they wrote still holds up. That third is worth saying. The rest was the fog, dressed up as certainty, looking for somewhere to land. Keep the third. Let the rest go quietly, without needing to defend why you wrote it in the first place. Everyone under this sky is writing something they won't send tonight, and that's exactly as it should be. You get to choose what this becomes. The same friction that could demolish something, handled with a little patience, becomes the exact pressure that reveals which walls in your life were actually load-bearing and worth reinforcing, and which ones you were only holding up out of habit anyway. The same fog that could make you assume the worst, sat with for even one more day, becomes the quiet you needed to hear what your own gut has been trying to tell you underneath all the noise. Nothing about this week requires you to have it all figured out right now. It just requires you to not build anything permanent using a read you took in bad light. Give it a few days. Let the dust settle, then decide. And you'll decide from somewhere much steadier than where you're standing tonight. If any part of this actually names something you're sitting with right now, that's worth paying attention to. Take the one thing that landed hardest, sit with it for a day before you act on it, and see what it looks like once the light clears. That's really the whole practice this week. Not forcing clarity, just refusing to build anything permanent until you actually have it. None of this is about waiting forever, or pretending nothing happened, or swallowing something that genuinely needs to be said out loud eventually. It's about timing the saying of it so it actually lands the way you mean it to, instead of arriving half-formed, shaped by pressure and bad light, instead of by what you actually think once you've had a real chance to look. You are allowed to still be figuring out what you feel. You are allowed to need a day before you know what you want to say. That's not indecision. That's just building on solid ground instead of on a wall that's still settling. And if you're watching this because something specific already happened this week, a message you're still turning over, a silence you can't quite read, a decision you're about to make that feels bigger than it maybe is, take that as your sign to give it one more day before you act. Not because your instincts are wrong, because right now, of all weeks, they deserve better light to work with than the light you've got tonight. Let it settle. Then choose. You'll be glad you waited, and whatever you decide from that steadier place will actually be the thing you meant.